Hey guys, the Wolf Den here, and today I have something really special to show all of you. It's a brand new Zoids build customized mobilized Storm Sworder that was made by Tomy quite a while back. I was browsing eBay the other day when I found this basically new in the box for a really great price. These models brand new are generally pretty pricey, but I found one for cheap in the UK, so I had my friend pick this up for me and had it shipped here. So this is honestly really exciting. The Storm Sworder is one of my favorite Zoids, and I've always wanted to put one of these together right out of the box. I have finished the high-end master model version, which I'll be using for a comparison later in this video, but I've never gotten the chance to build the motorized kit. So I thought it would be really cool to share this with all of you. So here it is, the Tomy Zoids Storm Sworder. The box itself is in pretty decent shape for how old it is. It's a little beat up, but not too bad. So for a little context, this model was released between 2001 and 2004 under the Zoids Build Customized Mobilized line. This Zoids toy line is mainly put out by Hasbro in the US, and is generally what a lot of people think of when it comes to Zoids kits from the early 2000s. The Storm Sworder, however, never saw a US release, but it was released in England by Tomy. So let's take a quick look at the box. So here we have the packaging. It's pretty basic and definitely not as interesting as the new Japanese release style boxes, which generally feature some kind of diorama or action scene on the front and sides, as well as the back. While it is simple, the box conveys enough information to tell you about the Zoid you're buying. It even has the original price tag on it too. The back and sides of the box are pretty basic as well. There's no lore or battle story like the new Japanese release boxes have, just basic descriptions of some of the parts and features. Now that the box is out of the way, let's take a look inside at the contents. So first out of the box, we have the standard instruction booklet. It actually features the new Japanese release art on the cover, which I think is pretty nice. These instructions are very simple, even more so given how everything is in English rather than Japanese. The pictures are easy to follow and there's no tricky parts to this build whatsoever, and it's very straightforward. This kit could easily be put together in an afternoon or so. Next, we have the battery pack. Unlike most other Zoids, the Storm Sworder has its batteries in this removable battery pack, rather than installed in the main body itself. That being said, I really wish it didn't have these ugly symbols printed on here though. Might have to fix that later down the line with some paint. The engine pods are modeled into the battery pack as well. As far as I can tell, these markings are only on the UK version, as from what I've seen, the new Japanese release Storm Sworders have a clean gray battery pack without the markings. Next up is the motor, still in its cardboard packaging. Simple enough, really. It controls the leg movements and drives the wings flapping mechanism. I always imagined that the Zoids core was located in the motor since it's the heart of the model, so to say. After that, we have a bag of small parts. The decals are in here, as well as the rubber caps and the pieces for the eyes, and finally our pilot. A quick view of bag number 1 with the parts still inside, featuring the legs and the body halves. It's really cool that these parts are still sealed in here after all of this time. And bag number 2, which houses the wings, head pieces, and blades. We'll get a closer look at these parts now that we've gone through all of the sealed contents. The Storm Sworder is molded in this really nice gunmetal silver, so it really doesn't need any kind of paint to look really nice out of the box. You could always hit it with an ink wash or paint to bring out some of the recessed detailing, but this is going to be a straight build, nothing fancy for the purpose of this review. Now that that's out of the way, let's take a closer look at the contents of the box. First up, we have a quick look at the motor. We get a nice look at the gunmetal silver that the model is molded in, and you can see the port for the battery pack on the top. Next, we have our first sprue. This mainly covers the detail parts and mechanism bits as well as the feet. The different wing-mounted weapon choices are here too. You've got a choice of 2 sets of weapons that can be mounted onto the wings, these being either the 2-barreled pulse laser guns or the iron claws. What's nice about this kit is that you can swap the weapons out anytime once the model is built, and you certainly don't have to choose between one option or the other. I also really like the large fan that will sit in the center of the body once the build is finished. Our next sprue is a simple one, mainly shows off the legs and the body halves. It features a bit of color here as the parts of the legs are colored black and separated from the gray. Unfortunately, the legs feature zero articulation outside of the feet and are very static, but you get some nice detail here in the legs, which could be painted to make them pop. The next sprue features parts for both the head of the model as well as the tail. One of the head pieces popped off in the bag and was rattling around, but it's still here, which is good. Here we have the next sprue, which is for the blades for both the head and the wings. These are called the top sword for the blade located on the head and the wing swords for the wings. I have to say I'm not a fan of the material these parts are made out of. The high-end master model definitely does this better. This material is pretty much rubbery. It feels like the polycaps and it is very easy to bend. And even handling it is sort of creasing it already, even though I've only had it in my hands for a few minutes. Not to mention, trying to get the sprue marks off is a major pain, which is why mine looks a bit messy later on in this video. It felt like cutting into the material would tear it to pieces rather than allowing it for a clean cut. The high-end master model version has a harder plastic, which can be posed easier and is not as bendy. I really think this kit would have benefited from that. I'm not really sure why they chose to make it out of this rubbery material. Hard plastic would have been better in my opinion. Here we have a quick shot of the headpiece that fell off the sprue earlier. And next we have the sprue containing the two large, gorgeous wings. The wings have some of that molded black or painted detail on it earlier, seen here. It's tricky to tell if this is painted on or if it's colored plastic, but the fact that it comes like this stock looks pretty nice. One of the things that I really like about this model is it has a very impressive wingspan. We'll get to that later in the video once the model is built, but you can sort of see here that the wings have a pretty big footprint. And I have to say I like how detailed these wings are too. Here we have a quick look at the sticker sheet. I won't be using any of these, but it's nice to hold on to these for reference. It features Helic Republic logos as well as the Zoids number, RZ029, plus smaller caution and warning labels. These are stickers, so they're just peel and stick rather than the water slide decals that come with the modern Zoids kits. Up next is a quick look at all the rubber caps that hold the Zoid together. Standard stuff really, nothing too fancy, and they feel pretty similar to what the blades are made out of. And lastly, we have our small bag of important parts, which contains the following. Both of the Storm Sworder's eyepieces, molded in a nice see-through orange plastic, which is used on a lot of Helic Republic Zoids in the new Japanese release line. And last but not least, we have our pilot figure molded in a light gray color. Pretty standard for most Zoids. Helic Republic Zoids come with gray pilots, while Gylos Empire Zoids come with blue pilots, at least during the new Japanese release line. This pilot figure could definitely use a bit of paint if you were so inclined, and they're pretty detailed for their size too. And with that, we've taken a look at all the contents of the box. I'm going to get this model built, and when we return, we'll take a look at the finished Storm Sworder. And finally, we have the completed Storm Sworder. I forgot to mention this earlier, but the Storm Sworder is a Pteranodon-type Zoid. It's actually one of the many Zoids which share this type, and it's, in my opinion, the coolest looking out of all of them. So on to the finished model. The build itself isn't very difficult, as most motorized Zoids tend to be, and it's fairly straightforward. The real only tricky part is making sure you get the top sword in the right position and orientation in the head, but I think that this was more on me rather than the instructions. So to sum up my thoughts overall before I really get into it, I wasn't really wowed by the final product. My biggest criticism of this model is definitely the wings. When it comes to the other Tomy Zoids kits, most of them look just fine static and not moving. Even the other models with large wings compared to their body sizes, like the Redler or the Salamander. The Storm Sworder is unfortunately an exception to this. The main issue being the wings. The Storm Sworder only has 2 real positions its wings can take. Technically, you can count them as 3, and that determines how the wings react to the rest of the model. The first position is when the wings are like this. They're not being supported by anything and are extremely loose and floppy and often touching the ground. They cannot hold the pose at all, so when the model is on the ground, it looks a little silly. I understand that this was probably intended to be a landing mode, or a non-moving mode, but at the same time, I think it looks weird. The wings are loose and floppy like this to allow for a flapping, moving motion once the Zoid is powered on. However, to achieve this gimmick, any kind of non-powered posability was sacrificed. I'll show off the flying gimmick and the moving gimmick a little later. The other major position is the flying position, and when the motor is engaged, the wings flap up and down in a rather slow and unimpressive motion. The wings rise up to the top of their arcs and remain there for a moment before dropping back down again to simulate a flapping movement. When they're at the top of their arcs, they are too static. They won't move. I suppose this was intended to be a sort of display while flying position, as box art often shows the Storm Sworders like this. However, they're much too static for me. They won't move. And honestly, the wings aren't made of the thickest plastic in the world, and while you could pose your model like this in a flight on a flight stand or string or something for long term, they feel like they are one tumble or slight movement away from snapping off entirely. The connection doesn't feel very solid, and again, the wings themselves don't feel very good. I feel like keeping the wings in this position for a long period of time is putting unneeded stress on them, and it stinks because this is, I guess, how you're supposed to display them while it's flying, and yet I don't really feel comfortable doing it or displaying it like this for extended periods of time. The tabs that hold the wings in and the whole mechanism itself just feels needlessly fragile, and to be honest, I don't really feel like it's good for the Zoid having them displayed like this, which again is a flying type Zoid. It doesn't feel right to me having the wings like this, and just having it be static with the wings on the ground is just not very impressive to me. And again, I will show the motion off later in this video, both the walking and the flying. And again, I'm not very impressed that they sacrificed pretty much all of the wings' posability in order to render this flying mechanism. So I'm not really pleased with the lack of the ability to pose the wings in general. One fix to this that I've thought of is by using plastic glue or putty to effectively gunk up the wing joints and make them more static and posable. But I'm not super into this method, as it would probably disable the moving mechanism permanently. That is probably my biggest gripe with this model, is that I feel like they made the posability and how it looked static and not moving more of an afterthought, and mainly wanted to do the wing flapping gimmick first, which is a shame because this is a gorgeous model. I really like how it looks and its whole aesthetic, but the fact that you can't really pose it correctly, which again is my interpretation of how it looks and how it operates, is a bit of a shame. It just doesn't feel like I can display it right, even with the display stand. And this is a point that I'm definitely going to have to give to the high-end master model. That model is a joy to pose and position, but we'll cover that a bit later. Now that my general gripes are out of the way, let's continue with the rest of the review. So besides my issue with the wings, the model itself is really nice looking. It's sleek, aerodynamic, aggressive, and honestly, I've always kind of loved this aesthetic since I saw it when I was a kid. This model has a small amount of posability, given how sort of static it is. By moving the head and neck in various positions, it can also rotate the wings and how they're oriented, from a ground-based landing position to a more natural flying pose, which I previously touched on. The wings themselves are pretty basic, nothing to write home about really besides the previously mentioned issues, but they do have nice bits of detail, and again, with a wash or a bit of paint could really pop. In terms of other bits of posability, the top sword on the Zoid's head, as well as the two wing swords, can be moved in various positions manually. I'm still not a fan of the plastic used for these blades. They feel like a subpar material and don't feel good to handle or move at all. Even just moving them out to show you guys just feels like I'm bending and warping these things out of position. They're really bendy, and it feels like it would not take much to get them bent out of shape permanently. The feet can also be posed in either landing mode or in flight mode, which is nice. That they move a small bit. The main Zoid that I can think of that looks a little ridiculous is the Salamander, because the legs do not really become aerodynamic at all in the slightest. But I do like how the feet do move to make the model a bit more streamlined. However, I do wish something that the high-end Master model does is that I wish the feet were able to move back fully to be flat and parallel against the ground. It's very close. It's angled downwards. It is very close, but the high-end Master model does really end up nailing this and making the feet fold up perfectly. Granted, this is better than not having them move at all, which would look ridiculous. So I will give the model points for that. But I do wish it could have just moved a small degree more. But it's still pretty nice as it is. One of the main gimmicks of this kit, besides the swords, are the swappable parts on the wings. This kit does feature part swapping, which is pretty neat. You can have either the iron claws, which are currently displayed now, or the two-barreled pulse laser guns on each wing, depending on your preference. They simply plug into the ports on the wings. No glue required, and you can swap them out whenever you like. The high-end Master model also does this, which I think it's neat that the gimmick carried over. For other movement and articulation, the head's beak can open and the pilot's seat can be lowered. It's a pretty interesting concept, though I do dislike how part of the seat sticks down through the beak. So I might end up sanding it down since it breaks the illusion a little bit, but I understand why it's there, so you can actually lower and put the pilot in the cockpit and put him back up in there. The backpack can be removed to replace the batteries, which is good. So it's not like some kits that if there's battery corrosion over a long period, it ruins the entire model. It's isolated to just the backpack, which makes storage a bit easier too. In terms of batteries, this kit requires 2 AAA batteries to make the wing flapping movements and the walking movements happen, which I have installed, and this Zoid does feature motorized walking action with the wings moving up and down as it does so. I'll certainly be showing both of these movements off momentarily. And there we go. This is the Storm Sworder while it's flying. It's honestly not that impressive. This is the wing flapping motion that I mentioned earlier. The feet do move while the wings are moving, which is a bit off-putting. But that is for the walking motion that I mentioned again. So it does make sense that they would move in this position too. It can walk without falling over, which is something it does better than the Salamander at least, which is nice. I'm not really wowed for this flying mode, especially because the designers based the entire gimmick of the wings being able to flap around it, and this is the result. The blades can be moved in position while this model is in motion. It's pretty much the main gimmick of this model that the blades can be moved. And honestly, yeah, I'm just not very wowed with this gimmick in general, but it's just a shame considering that as a flying Zoid, it just doesn't display very well. At least that's what I think. And finally, for the last part of this review, we're going to take a quick look to see how this kit stacks up with the high-end Master Model Storm Sworder made by Kotobukiya. Well, I have mine here, and honestly, it's no question that the HMM is the better kit. As biased as I am towards the old Tomy motorized kits, the HMM version is easily the better option. The build is more engaging, it's larger, more detailed, the feet fold up for flying mode, and the wings can be posed freely without having to rely on a motor gimmick among some of its other features. The wingspan of the HMM is similar with the Tomy kit, however you can see that the high-end Master model is bigger slightly. At the time that I'm recording this video, a new Storm Sworder on eBay is generally listed for about $100. And the high-end Master Model Storm Sworder generally goes for about the same price or a bit lower, usually to $70 to $100, depending on where you're shopping from. Of course, this can change if you browse other places, so I'll just be using this as an example. They're roughly the same price. So overall, if it comes down to it, get the high-end Master model, unless you really need the Tomy model. And lastly, we have, here's the walking motion. Again, I'm not really wowed by this. It's a little charming, I suppose, and it's able to walk without falling over. But it was definitely not worth sacrificing the wings being able to be posed at all for this gimmick. And I know the model being able to move is a gimmick in and of itself, but I'm not very wowed, and that's even set by the standards of other motorized kits like the Shield Liger, Liger Zero, and even some of the larger models like Ultrasaurus that have much more complicated walking mechanisms and still pull it off. So I guess my final verdict on the Tomy Storm Sworder is it's okay. It's cool and I'm happy to have it, especially since I've been wanting to build this model since I was a kid. But if you have the choice, pick up the high-end Master Model version. The Tomy kit is good if you get it for a good price or if you get it used or you just have to have one or if you're a Tomy collector. But for everyone else, pick up the Kotobukiya Storm Sworder instead. I mean, the details are nice. I do like the large jet intake fan on the front of the model. And I do like the details and the swappable parts, but honestly, this build left me feeling like I wanted more. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10. I'm the Wolf Den, and this has been my review for the Tomy Zoids Storm Sworder. Thanks for watching!